Hello, this is Bishop Manigault. Welcome to Bishop's Corner. Thank you for taking the time to stop by today. I want to share with you a word coming from the book of Daniel, chapter 1, verses 1 through 7. This is what the word of the Lord says. In the 3rd year of the reign of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came to Jerusalem and besieged it. And the Lord delivered Jehoiakim, king of Judah, into his hand, along with some of the articles from the temple of God. These he carried off into the temple of his God in Babylonia, and put in the treasure house of his God. Then the king ordered Ashpenaz, chief of his court officials, to bring into the king's service some of the Israelites from the royal family and the nobility, young men without any physical defect, handsome, showing aptitude for every kind of learning, well-informed, quick to understand, and qualified to serve in the king's palace. He was to teach them the language and literature of the Babylonians. The king assigned them a daily amount of food and wine from the king's table. They were to be trained for 3 years, and after that they were to enter the king's service. Among those who were chosen were some from Judah: Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. The chief official gave them new names. To Daniel the name Belteshazzar, to Hananiah Shadrach, to Mishael Meshach, and to Azariah Abednego. This is the word of the Lord. When Nebuchadnezzar conquered Jerusalem, he did not immediately destroy it. He destroyed it in stages. The first stage was to defeat the armies of the now conquered nation. Next, they would capture the capital city and enslave its inhabitants. Once this was done, he carried away the children of the rulers back to Babylon. They would serve as hostages and insurance that the remaining Jews would not get out of line. If you pay attention, this is what the enemy is doing in our world today. He has set his forces against all that is right and holy and is endeavoring to destroy them in stages. In fact, I fear he has broken through the last line of defense, which is the family. He has co-opted the world system to such an extent that now there is a serious effort underway to redefine the family. The traditional family of mother, father, and children are the capital city, as it were, of human civilization. There is a concerted effort now underway by the enemy to enslave the family and ultimately to carry it away into captivity, and through that captivity, destroy it. What makes this so insidious is that there are many among us who call themselves Christians who are actually aiding and abiding and abetting this evasion and enslavement. In the name of tolerance, in the name of inclusiveness, we are selling out to the enemy who is not tolerant, who is not inclusive of anyone or anything at any time. We live in a day that seeks to change everything and everyone into its own perverted and twisted image of what they say we should be. When Babylon conquered Judah and enslaved the inhabitants of Jerusalem, the text says among these captives were 4 young men of the tribe of Judah: Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. The plan was to train or indoctrinate these young men into the Babylonian culture. They would be taught the learning and the tongue of the Chaldeans. One of the first acts of indoctrination that the Babylonians performed was the changing of the names of these young captives. Daniel, whose name meant God is my judge, was renamed Belteshazzar, which means the prince of Bel, a heathen god. Hananiah, which name meant God has been gracious, was renamed Shadrach, servant of sin, a moon god. And Mishael, whose name meant who is equal to God, was named Abednego, which means servant of Ishtar. Ishtar was a Babylonian goddess of love, sensuality, fertility, and war, giving her the extraordinary ability to both create life and to take life. This practice of changing a person's name is not a new one. It has been used for thousands and thousands of years. Thousands of years after Babylon, it would be used again. In a land called America, it would once again be employed to break a people's connection with their home, their families, and their culture. For if you don't know who you are, what you are, and where you are truly a captive indeed. My brothers and sisters, we live in a time of great captivity. There are thousands of people who have become enslaved in the faraway land called lost identity. When you lose who you are and what you are, you have no future. Just as Daniel and his associates were carried away against their will, so too many of our young people are carried away as well. Never ceases to amaze me of the many ways that the experience of black people in America parallel the experiences of the Hebrews in the Old Testament. These young Jewish men ended up enslaved because their parents forsook God and transgressed his commands. They brought the enemy to the camp and showed them the riches of their land. By refusing to live their lives God's way, they were defenseless against their Babylonian conquest. I want to suggest to you that we too have refused to walk faithful before the God who made us and the God who called us to be his people. And as a direct result, we have left ourselves and our children open to the exploitation and captivity by a cruel and oppressive enemy. We, in fact, have brought the enemy into our camp with our drugs and our casual attitudes about sex and relationships. With our ambivalence about spiritual things, we have allowed the enemy into our camp, and now he is plundering the riches of our land. We now stand hopeless, hapless, and helpless as we watch our young men and women become grist for the mill of greed, unbridled pleasure, unfulfilling fame, and ever-fickle fortune. Many of our young people don't know who they are, where they are, and whose they are. It's becoming more and more difficult for them to acknowledge their need of a God who they've never heard about because many of us were too busy getting our swerve and our swag on and competing for that so-called almighty dollar. Yes, we live in a time of great captivity indeed. However, what is noteworthy about Daniel and his companions is that even though they were young, they did not just live, but they thrived in the midst of a corrupt and wicked system. They were able to succeed without selling out. They were able to conquer without capitulating their moral principles. They were able to prosper, but with purity. They were able to achieve without abdicating who and what they were. You see, the Babylonians changed their names, but they could not change their nature. How were these young people able to do this? They were taught since birth the truths that would sustain them throughout their life. What truths? The truth that their former names were a constant reminder of. God is gracious. There is none equal to him, and he alone is the judge of our thoughts and actions. They recognized and remembered that despite their present circumstance, there is a God who sits high and looks low. They recognized and remembered that the earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof, the world, and they that dwell therein. Daniel and his friends understood this better than most. They were willing, therefore, to stand in the midst of a decadent and depraved society and yet not be defiled by their world system. We need more men and women who are willing to stand for the truth that they were taught in Sunday school, the truth that they were taught at home, and the truth that they were taught even in church. We need more men and women who refuse to be defiled by this world system. So my question today, will you be the Daniel that is needed in our day? And I say to you, if you are willing, the God we serve will give you a nature that is more than just a name. So when we come back next time, I want to talk to you more about this nature that God gives us, that is more than just a name. But until then, my time is up, and I do thank you for yours. See you next time. May God bless you, and may heaven smile upon you, is my prayer. Bye-bye.